In essence, what it did show is that our planet is a miracle. It does not matter whether you believe Earth was created by an omniscient God or grown by physical forces from cosmic dust circling around a nascent star, or generated as a computer simulation. We're traveling in a spaceship 107,800 kilometers an hour around a star that is in turn traveling 69,200 kilometers an hour in the suburban part of our galaxy. There are 400 billion planets in our galaxy alone, orbiting around at least 100 billion stars. What makes Earth truly unique is life. Life on Earth and its mind-blowing, intertwining complexity is the greatest miracle humanity has known. The preceding quote comes from the 2020 publication The Nature of Nature, Why We Need the Wild by Enric Sala. Sala introduces himself as a former university professor who saw himself writing the obituary of ocean life and quit academia to become a full-time conservationist as a National Geographic Explorer in Residence. At National Geographic, Sala founded Pristine Seas, a project to inspire world leaders to protect the last wild places in the ocean. In the quote before, Sala is speaking to lessons learned from Biosphere 2, a research facility in Oracle, Arizona, that in 1991 attempted to construct a viable, self-sustaining human colony that represented a simplified model of Earth's biosphere. 8 individuals lived in an artificial environment that included multiple types of biomes and into which was added wildlife and plant life. At the 16-month mark, the oxygen concentration had dropped from 21% to 14%. The carbon dioxide levels generated by the activity of microbes had risen, and much of the initial wildlife had died. The technology scientists possess today may make more viable longer-term maintenance of a project like this, but from Biosphere 2 in the 1990s we can still glean the reality that maintaining ecosystem and atmosphere is difficult, and, Sal insists, this should inspire awe in us toward the biosphere we inhabit, planet Earth. After generations of study by biologists, ecologists, and others, there remains so much that we still don't know about the creatures with whom we share this planet. Every year, scientists discover about 6,000 new species. It's estimated that the total number of species on Earth is 9 million, not including single-celled organisms. This is the miracle, as Sala calls it, at which Charles Darwin marveled, writing in On the Origin of Species. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, having been originally breathed into a few forms and into one, and that, whilst this planet has gone cycling on according to the fixed law of gravity, from so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and most wonderful have been, and are being evolved. Sala wrote The Nature of Nature as a sort of crash course in ecology, with hopes that readers would leave the book with a better understanding of how much humans rely on other species and what value there is in preserving the wild. A marine biologist, Sala's investigations into questions of ecological succession and biodiversity often focus on marine life, but he does for writing terrestrial ecosystems such as Yellowstone National Park at times. These two concepts, ecological succession and biodiversity, are key to Sala's arguments about interdependencies and preservation. Ecological succession describes the logical succession of steps by which an ecosystem is assembled from simple to more complex. There are patterns, degrees of predictability in the process, assuming that no disruptions like lava or fires interfere. Ecosystems will often have areas at different stages of ecological succession. Sala considers an old forest that is more a mosaic of patches of different successional stages, rather than a full canopy of ancient trees. Sala notes that ecological succession is not limited to just the wild. Human-built environments, like the city of New York, are ecosystems that have followed a particular path to grow from ramshackle towns to booming cities. The difference between the ecosystems of the wild and the ecosystems of humanity are in organization. Humans want quantity over quality, growth over development, production over protection, usually realized in the most inefficient ways. Natural ecosystems self-organize with an increase in species richness, size, and age of organisms. biomass, productivity, efficiency in the recycling of organic matter, three-dimensional structure created by living organisms, and stability, among other properties. We turn mature ecosystems into monocultures, cultures of single species, which are the simplest of ecosystems. The dominant human influence on ecological succession has been reversal, the transformation of the complex into the simple, the fragmentation of the biosphere. Moreover, this radical change is not always the result of direct action, like clear-cutting forests to set up a soybean farm. Through the nature of nature, Sala highlights the species and environment interconnections that can transcend time and geography. One example is the otter-orca phenomenon in Alaska. In coastal ecosystems like Shemya Island, otters were few and sea urchins, a common food for otters, were abundant in eating all the kelp. Few other species were present. At another island, otters were seen being eaten by orcas. Alan Springer of the University of Alaska provided one hypothesis for this situation. He traced the predatory patterns of the orcas around these Alaskan islands to the hunting of smaller whales by Japanese and Russian whalers after World War II, an enterprise that went so far as to eliminate about 9 out of 10 whales in the North Pacific by the late 1960s. Orcas who would typically eat these other whales were compelled to hunt harbor seals, then sea lions, and finally sea otters. The population of sea otters dwindled, allowing sea urchins to proliferate. The sea urchin's consumption of kelp drove out other species who would have benefited from the plant. Because of human decisions 50 years ago that had no intention of harming otter populations, biodiversity declined in these coastal ecosystems. Biodiversity refers to the variety of life on our planet. It is often measured by species richness, or the number of species in one place. The ecologists prefer to measure how species are distributed within an ecosystem, how evenly or how equitable. When I think of biodiversity, the documentary The Biggest Little Farm comes to mind. Released in 2018 and available at apricotlanefarms.com, The Biggest Little Farm chronicles the multi-year work of husband-wife team John and Molly to restore health to 214 acres of land in California that had undergone 50 years of industrial farming, leaving the soil devoid of life. Through the introduction of dozens of fruits and vegetables and various animal species, Apricot Lane Farms was brought to life as a fully functioning interdependent ecosystem. The introduction and encouragement of biodiversity was crucial. Because of intentional action to live in harmony, or comfortable disharmony with nature, the farm produced more life than it had before under monocultural systems. Sala, along with some colleagues, pored over the literature on marine ecosystems and human fisheries to likewise find the more biodiversity, the more benefits a marine ecosystem provides for us. Better and more resilient fisheries, flood protection, cleaner coastal water, less incidence of disease because of contaminated fish and shellfish, and so on and so forth. Therefore, when human activities reduce biodiversity, they also reduce the ability of the ocean to provide for us. The health of our planet is essential to the survival of humans and the survival of other species. The last century and a half or so has displayed incredible human encroachment into the wild, further simplification of the complex to accommodate quantity while sacrificing quality. Sala reports that in 2019, the United Nations warned that human activities will drive the extinction of 1 million species of plants and animals, 1 in 9, in the next few decades. Since 1970, 60% of terrestrial wildlife has been lost. Only 30% of the birds left on the planet are wild. The remaining 70% are poultry, mostly chickens. According to the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, in 1961, there were 0.0024 chickens per person. In 2016, because of the growth of concentrated animal feeding operations, there were 8.82 chickens per person, an over 360,000% increase from about 50 years ago. This dominance has been made possible because humans cheat, so to speak, using energy from the past to subsidize our overexploitation of the present. The energy comes from the necrosphere, the dead layer of our planet that includes fallen leaves and the remains of a whale that has died and sunk to the deep sea. It is the most ancient portion of the necrosphere, the dead remains that are transformed into fossil fuels by extreme heat and pressure that Sala argues has enabled humans to grow as a species and change ecosystems as controllers of nature. The cities of today, with their populations in the millions, would not be possible without this ancient energy. The result was greater wealth and higher GDP, but at what price? Other measurements of national performance, like the Environmental Protection Index and the Environmental Maturity Index, provide one answer. One study, linked below, found a strong negative correlation between GDP and EPI. In considering the moral imperative of humans to conserve the wild, Sala quotes a friend. No religion has ever preached that our role on earth is to destroy, or to leave less for those who will come after us. No wisdom tradition teaches that it's okay for a generation to drive the world toward ruin. We are taught instead that we must safely pilot the ark. COVA is driven by dual concern for animal well-being and for creation care. In many ways, these are connected. The creation mandate is well known among Christians. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground." From Paul, we know how creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. God's care for creation is evidenced in the Psalms, and the pattern of human inheritance and defilement of creation is condemned in the prophets. Hosea cried out, "Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has a charge to bring against you who live in the land. There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land. There is only cursing, lying, and murder, stealing, and adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Because of this, the land dries up, and all who live in it waste away. The beasts of the field, the birds in the sky, and the fish in the sea are swept away." Nature has intrinsic value conferred by God, who called the land and the animals good apart from human existence. Sala writes that it's the awe and wonder that makes people fall in love with the natural world and begin to care in ways they may never have known possible. It's through falling in love that the value and the accompanying moral imperative to act is more starkly realized. Perhaps part of the reason for the current state of human engagement with the wild in industrialized nations is that we no longer see enough of nature. We don't know it, and how can we love what we do not know? Sala points to indigenous peoples, like tribes in the Amazon who fought ranchers and miners to preserve their homelands and forests, as examples to follow in understanding our connections as humans to the wild. The irony, Sala writes, is that the fate of all the species on which our very existence depends is in our hands, and we are squeezing them off the planet at a rate second only to the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs. We have become the asteroid, but we can still save ourselves and our natural world. Removing ourselves from the ecosystem is out of the question. What's done is done. We are inextricably tied to the wild, so propositions of living separately fall apart. What we can do is push for a more harmonious coexistence of the tamed human world and the wild, starting with the conservation of what has been entrusted to us. We need protection of the land and oceans. We need care for creation. We need the wild.